I was living the script that was handed down by my parents based on how I grew up. And how I grew up, there was never any real conversation. When I first started in the corporate, it was that, for me, it was the whole, I want the money, I want the promotions, I want the accolades, right? That's what success looked like for me. I don't think I've got the words to be able to put into it's because it's a feeling, right? There's no words to it. I can't express, happiness doesn't even touch it. It's okay to not be a superhero 100% of the time. The cape can sometimes just be tucked away.
To Get a Shift On, your podcast all about career change and career transition, showing you that career change really is possible. Today, I am really pleased to welcome Doris Walsh, who we met actually on LinkedIn from a mutual connection, Heidi. Heidi introduced us, and it's been an absolute pleasure to get to know Doris over the last couple of weeks. We've had a pre-chat. So Doris, welcome along to the podcast.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here, David.
Thank you so much for coming on. And I know we're going to have a great deal to talk about. Doris runs her own business called Happy Funny Coaching, which I will let her explain because she does it very well and far better than I can do it justice. But Doris, start please. Where did it all start for you and how have you got to where you are today?
Okay, so in a nutshell, I'm what I call myself is nearly a 20-year corporate escapee. Towards the kind of last 5 years of my corporate career, I was starting to feel this niggle of, this is it, right? By that point, I'd moved countries with our kids and back to UK, married to 2 horrible kids at that point. And I was like, there's something else. But, it was kind of like always busy doing work and all that kind of stuff, and the family and whatever else, and all the logistics that come with that. I didn't really have time to really explore that, but it was always there. Like I call it, it's kind of like Chinese water torture. I was just kind of slowly dripping away. But I really did nothing with it because my life was really so comfortable, right? When you've got both, a husband and wife working for the same company, great pay, benefits, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's just really comfortable, right? Why would you want to choose, right, to leave? Because I wasn't depressed. I wasn't really unhappy, right? There was just this little tinge of something. So then what I call the gift of COVID came. I know COVID, changed the whole world, but for me, it was a real gift to me in terms of the company was looking at restructuring, and there was opportunity for voluntary redundancy. So I kind of sat there. I was like, this is really exciting. Let's go. Right. And my husband said, no, you don't want to do that. Right? And Doris said, no, I think I do. And he was like, no, you don't. So I took the plunge because I think without it, I probably wouldn't have. Right. And so as I took voluntary redundancy, finished work, my husband actually got headhunted. And we then moved from the UK to Greece for our next adventure. And that's kind of been how we've lived our lives over the since we've actually had the children. Our children have never lived in any one place more than kind of 3 years since they've been alive. And I've got a 12 and a half and an 11-year-old. So I said, yeah, let's go to Greece and have our adventure. So I moved to Greece. He had a job. I didn't. And I said, well, okay, I'm going to take a sabbatical because one, it's in a country that neither of us had any friends or contacts. Let me go and explore. And the real question that I really wanted to answer for myself was, what does Doris want to be when she grows up? Because I'd never known. In corporate, as you'll know, right? It's like this little tap on the shoulder. Hey, this is the next opportunity here, right? And I think it's time for something else, right? It was never really my choice. So yeah, so I took some time out, settled the kids, did all the admin stuff around finding a house and all that kind of stuff. And I kind of got pulled into coaching, just something that came up regularly. Went to parenting class because at some point, in the kind of the first about 6 months in, our son was having big major meltdowns, and it was the first time in my life that I kind of put my hand up and said, I have no idea what I'm doing here anymore. My toolbox is empty. I have no idea how to deal with this volatile child. Because up until that point, I'm Chinese from background. So everything that you've ever known, stereotypes about Chinese, I lived that life, right? So when my child suddenly starts not behaving, right, how I expected to, I sat there, I was like, well, this isn't right. So yeah, I went to parenting class, and you know, nothing rocket sciencey, right? But it was quite a nice space to be able to say, oh, okay, I'm not the only one, right? There's something else I can do. And so that kind of pulled me into coaching. Again, not something that I had, you know, intentionally been looking at, but I was kind of like, well, there's something going on here. Let me kind of go and explore it. Explored it and I said, I think I can do this, right? So spoke to my husband and said, Alex, do you think this will be something that you could see me doing? And he was like, yeah, honey, I think you'd be really good at it. You just need to learn to shut up. And I was like, okay, then I can learn to shut up. So yeah, so that's how I then booked myself onto a 1 year basically coaching course, graduated and all that kind of stuff. And then there was a bit of, quite a bit of procrastination about, hey, oh my God, you know what I mean? I've got my shiny new, certificate. What do I do now? I'm open for business. And you sit there like this and it's like, where's business, right? And you're like, oh, okay, that's not kind of how it happens, is it? So what is it that I want to do? Because by that point, I'd already decided I wanted to go out on my own rather than go and potentially go back to corporate. I was like, well, corporate last few years there's just something not quite right there. Do I want to go back? So my view was start my own business because I can always go back to corporate. So that's what I did. And Happy Bunny Coaching was born out of that. The name itself came out. It took a while for me to get to it. But it's that saying, yeah, I'm not a happy bunny, right? Because of whatever. And I was like, well, actually, ultimately, I want people to be happy bunnies after they've gone through, the transformative process, of coaching with me. And just so happened, Bunny, I'm Chinese. I was born the year the rabbit. And I was like, yeah, okay, this is it. And then, when I talked to some other people, especially my web designer's like, oh, happy bunny. Oh, got a lot of inspiration out of that. And I was like, okay, done. Let's go. So that's how it came about.
Excellent. That sounds wonderful, and how very apt that you were born in the year of the rabbit.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, exactly right.
Well, look, lots to talk about from that, but I feel that I have to ask one question on behalf of your husband and all the other husbands and men out there. Did you learn to shut up, and have you moved forward with that?
Well, it is I'm waffling here now because there's no one real answer to this, right? It depends on the mood that I am in. And the thing is that I love having fun. I've not had as much fun as I've been having now since I left corporate, right? And since I've been going on this my own personal development journey. So have I learned to shut up? Definitely no. But there is science behind that, right? Men require less words a day, right? Women are a lot more wordy, right? So, I can't really go against, science, but it's the kind of when it's required, definitely yes. And I have definitely learned to shut up more when I'm with my kids too, instead of me now kind of telling them all this kind of stuff and just issuing orders like some drill sergeant, right? I now don't 90% of the time don't do it anymore, I guess, and allow them the space to take it. I then kind of step more into the kind of coaching, open-ended, empowering kind of questions, right? Rather than, why didn't you do that? Why didn't you do this? All that kind of stuff. So yes, I can. I have learned, I've bettered my capability in that aspect.
There is no answer to that other than brilliant. Because I will, as a man, have less words to say and leave it to you as my guest, which is absolutely right. Going to the children and the drill sergeant bit, was that the sort of bringing up that you had? You talked about Chinese stereotypes, and I think part of that is possibly very strict parenting. You will go and do this, you will do that. You will become, we talked about it before, one of the top 5 employments, medicine, engineering, lawyers, etc. Was that the bringing up that you had?
Yeah, yeah. And actually, do you know what? It's really funny. I'd never really kind of thought about it too deeply as I was an adult and even as I became a parent. But so much with the power of hindsight and with the power of creating space in my own world, just Doris' world, not Doris as a mom or Doris as a wife or, Doris as a daughter, just my world. And having that time to explore. I was a friggin' dictator to my kids first, probably best part of 6, 7 years of their lives. And I didn't know it. because I was living, I've talked about script earlier, I was living the script that was handed down by my parents based on how I grew up. And how I grew up, there was never any real conversation. It was order, you do, and order, and immediately do. Not, messaging doesn't get through for 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 seconds. I say jump, you immediately do, right? So when you come from that kind of environment, and and this is and I behaved how my parents expected me to. So when my own kids don't, right, you kind of sit there, I was like, well, no, hold on a second. And for a long period of time, I think I was I I scared my kids. Really, I scared my kids. I used my power as the parent over my children to get them to behave in the way that was acceptable to me, because my children's behavior were actually a reflection of how I saw myself, in terms of, if they behave badly, that means I'm a bad mother, right? And that link has, over the last kind of year or even past 2 years, have slowly kind of eroded away, because, through coaching, through me having being coached about my own beliefs and how I show up as a woman, as a, wife, as a parent. And it's been totally eye opener, so the link, that kind of immediate feedback in terms of my behavior to me now is much further away. It's kind of much more detached. It's kind of like I'm able to see my children as their own whole individual, little monster, and what they do has actually got nothing to do with me. They are just doing them, right? Doesn't mean I'm uncaring. It means that I just give them the space to evolve in whichever way form, instead of, pointing them. No, it's only between these two lines, honey. As long as you stay between these two lines, mommy's going to be okay. I'm like, there is no lines. However you want to do it. I set boundaries in terms of how they're expected behavior within my house. But with anything aside from that, don't get yourself into trouble, right? Stay legal, right? I mean, they're only 12 and a half and 11, right? So I'm still safe in that respect, right? But yeah, it's definitely how I grew up, and I was direct transmission straight to my kids. And I'm very consciously now working and cutting some of those ties, so that they don't have to kind of go through the hell that I went through as a child.
I can really relate to that. I feel that I have probably been through a similar transition with my kids as well. Although my son did turn around to me the other day, he was having a moment, and he basically said that I was a dictator and that I was just asserting my dominance as a parent on him, because isn't that what parents do? He's 12.
Wow. I mean, but that is so amazing, right? That one, I never had, but and when I look back on as 12, I didn't even have those language, right? And two, I would
Uh-huh.
never dare say anything that was even critical of my parents, saying that my parents weren't good or were bad. I mean, Jesus freaking Christ. I mean, Chinese back in their generation, kind of the whole, kind of punishment, right? It was kind of like not just a ruler, you know what I mean? It was kind of like, here's a,
Yeah,
right, and off you get it, right? But yeah, it's amazing. So what was your response to him?
that I laughed. We were walking down the street, and he'd had a particular moment. I won't bore you with my son's misdemeanors and issues, but it was really funny. He just turned to me in the street as we were walking down the street and said that. And there is a part of me with that is immensely proud. And I feel so lucky that he feels he can say that to me. I nearly stepped into the road in shock, if I'm honest, but I was very pleased. And I love the fact that we can have that open relationship. Similar to you, obviously not the Chinese background, I have very strict parents, and I would never have spoken to my parents like that. I probably didn't even know those words. And he's a little smart ass anyway, and he knows it, and he knows exactly how to twist and manipulate. And you know what? I will give that to him. And 90% of the time, we can talk it through. And we were actually off to play some rugby down in the park, because I said he'd had a moment and he just wanted to go and chill. So we just went and played rugby. He got over his dictatorship. I obviously dominate him. And then he dominated me with the rugby ball. So that's just the way it goes. But I think it's very interesting to have those conversations. And what I think is so different for me, and I'm interested to know if it's the same for you, and you talked about the coaching. I came from my corporate world, and I know that since I left my corporate job and my last fully employed employment that I am a whole different me. I have mellowed. I have found out more about myself than ever before. And I am so different. If I look back 8 years, 7 years, 8 years, that has changed so much. And that has changed the way that I've parented. So I'm interested to know from you, do you think, other than the coaching bit, the move to Greece, the taking the redundancy from that corporate world, is that when that change started to happen with you, your parenting?
Yeah, yeah. I think that was leaving the corporate world was definitely a trigger point for me. So I think, and as I've gone through my journey and followed other people and spoken to other people, um, who, I think it's typically that there typically is some sort of trigger. It doesn't never needs to be massive, right? But there'll be some trigger points that will give you the space to kind of think. So when I was in corporate, similar to you, you're a cog, right, in some massive machine, and the machine has to keep running, right? And you kind of know your role within it. There are certain ways that you can change things around, but ultimately you are doing stuff that meets someone higher up to you's agenda, right? Not all of it will be about me. Right. So, yes, we all learn new skills as we go through our corporate lives. Those skills, from my experience, has always been more kind of job specific, right? Okay, you need some more sales training, right? Because you're getting a sales role, or you're now doing some logistics or whatever. Okay, well, let's teach you the latest, whatever, it's all specific skills for a specific job. None of that kind of training was anything to do with who I am inside, right? That corporate isn't massively interested in. I've had some really great managers and some really not so great managers, right? But for a corporate, you're there to really improve the bottom line ultimately, right? Whether that's in actual dollars or whether it's efficiency, productivity, or whatever else, right? So I think stepping away from it and not having that kind of pressure in that kind of way was just so freeing, because I didn't have to do things that potentially I didn't particularly want to do, right? And when you have that free space to really just only satisfy one person, that is me, it was scary initially because I wasn't used to that kind of freedom. But that is when I got really interested in, okay, who am I really? That's what I said, right? It's about, who does Doris want to be when she grows up, right? And there is no limit. And the only limit that I found was that the limits that I actually put into it's from my own brain, right? Based on what, all the stuff that I've gone through in my life. And yes, so I've now been away from corporate about 4 years. I'm a totally different person than I was still in the same body, but totally different in terms of how I look at things, how I react to things, how I even speak and how I even think. Lots of things have kind of, sometimes I think the screw has gone in so tight, right? That this, you walk in such a narrow path, and now it's kind of like everything is loosened, right? So it allows me, the more authentic me, I guess, to shine through. Do I truly know who I am 100%? I don't, because I'm still evolving. I'm still learning. I'm still growing. I'm still, trying to improve on bits of myself that I want to improve on. But it's all down to me. And that's the really exciting and fun bit.
You took the words out of my mouth. I was about to ask, is that an exciting place for you to be?
Oh, it is the best. It is the best feeling. And I think when we had our first conversation, it's like, I've never been happier. Even I look back at my corporate career and where I am just now, right? I am nowhere near what I was earning in corporate, right? Nowhere near, right? But I feel free. I feel free because I am able to be me. No, no extra makeup, no extra armor, no, oh shit, I've got to work with this person. I don't like him. There's just so much freedom, and that in itself, I mean, it's unquantifiable. It's priceless, really, right? To have that feeling, and based on this feeling that I have now, and I live in, basically every day, bar some moments with the hard kids, right? It is very, I know I'm much more certain and much more confident of what I'm able to achieve in some way, which is really, it's kind of like, well, no matter what it is that I want to earn, I know that I can do that. There is no restriction to, if we talk about money, how much I can earn. It's just depending on whether I want to earn that or not, right? And I don't have to go through gate reviews, and PowerPoint decks and ask God's right hand man, whether this is an okay to proceed, right? It is my effort is 100%, it reflects immediately back to me, not it goes up there before I get a little bit tidbit back, right? It is, if I put in the effort, I'll get it back, right? And that is so amazingly energizing and exciting, right? And I just want to take a week off and just watch Netflix, I can do that, right? Yeah, okay, apart from I got bored after, 3 hours, right? But I can choose.
You
I have
can.
more freedom in terms of choice and what it is I want to do. And it's, just incredible, absolutely incredible feeling.
A slave to yourself, you ask the questions, you tell yourself what you want to do. And that freedom is so exciting. And what you've just said, if I could bottle up that last 2 minutes of conversation and share with my clients, because one of the biggest fears that people have is, what if?
Yes.
I'll lose myself. I'll lose the respect. I won't have the money. I won't have the time. I won't have the freedom. But I talk to my clients and I say, that's not the case. Listen to the people who've been there, who've done it. Don't go ask your husband, don't ask your wife, don't ask your best friend. They're going to give you what they think is the best advice. Go and ask Doris. Ask Doris, what does it feel like to leave your career and do something completely different? And that freedom and the animation that you have and the happiness that clearly comes across from you absolutely shows everything.
And I think that's it. And was there no fear in me when I left corporate? Of course, I friggin' were, right? I kind of lived, when I look at how well I've done, in terms of corporate, I've lived a pretty charmed life, right? No real money issues, whatever we wanted to do in terms of holidays, exotic ones or not, we just did, right? No real, oh my God, no, and so I know I'm very, very lucky, right? But I worked for it, right? I did the grafting and all that kind of stuff to get, I didn't steal it of anyone. But when I left it, it was kind of like, oh shit, right? How are we going to pay for the mortgage? How are we going to afford a car? How are we going to do the holidays? And all of these kind of things. But it's actually, for me, it was the freedom of not, okay, fine. Let's put it on black and white. So for me, how I went through that process was actually, what is the bare minimum that I actually need to survive on, right? So that requires the house, right? It requires the mortgage, right? Does it, and all the base minimum needs. And actually, what I found was that I didn't need my corporate salary to live that life, right? I was way less, right? Okay, yes, we wouldn't have gone on exotic foreign holidays, right? We couldn't afford it, right? But I also, through that process, find out about all these frivolous, sometimes, stuff that I was doing that actually, was it really adding value to my life? Or was I really doing it to kind of keep up with the Joneses, right? And a lot of that external stuff is keeping, looking as if you're as successful as your colleague next door. And then sometimes when you're in that world, you don't know any different because everyone around you is doing the same thing, right? All your colleagues are going, oh, once a year, we'll go 3 years and somewhere in the Far East, right? And for me, I've never kind of really done that kind of massive comparison. Why did he get it and I didn't get it, or whatever else, right? I've been always been more self-competitive within me, right? So for me, it was kind of like, well, this year we took the kids to Asia, right? Where are we going to take the kids next year? It's got to be better than Asia, right? Oh, okay. So another part of the world, another continent. Oh, well, we take them to the Caribbean then, right? It's that internal competition with yourself to say, hey, I can do better. I can do better. Look at me, those are shiny object syndrome. But actually, doing all these kind of things, actually, if I didn't do them, would I still have enough, fun with the kids? Of course I would have. So when I stepped away from it, I was kind of like, it was kind of like pressure release valve. There was no expectations to kind of have to keep up anymore. I now get to do what I get to do. And I guess for us kind of moving to another country where, we knew no one, right? So it was kind of a real fresh start, right? I didn't have to really play up to some sort the facade that I'd put on over the 2 decades that I was in corporate. Could kind of leave it. I mean, it took a while to get it really ripped out of me, right? But I was like, oh, no one here cares. No one here knows me, right? So I can actually do so by moving my environment totally. It actually kind of boosted my speed in terms of kind of how I made that transformation. And I know not everyone has that benefit, right? But yeah, stepping away was just the best thing. And actually, when I speak to my husband now, the thing that is going to make me cry is if I have to go back into a corporate role, that would really be soul destroying.
Yeah, I completely empathise with that as well. I think probably I am unemployable these days for many reasons. I probably always was, and I was probably always a bit of a horrible employee, but I'm certainly, fully unemployable. I'm glad you touched on the financial bit there, because actually that was going to be my next question to you, was about how did you manage? So obviously, when people come from such a big salary, one of the biggest fears is about dropping that, not being able to manage. And you talk about figuring out what you need, what you don't need. I refer to that as the minimum viable income, because they're the bits and pieces that you need: the mortgage, the rent, the education, whatever it happens to be. That's that minimum, and then everything else, as you mentioned, is almost frivolous. I think even if you're not drawn by flashy things, nice clothes, etc., as you mentioned, when you live in that corporate environment, everyone's doing the same. So you think nothing of having a nice car. Oh, it's Starbucks time. Oh, let's go to prep for lunch. Let's do all these things. I've got my nice suit. I've got my nice tie. I've got my nice shoes. And you step away from it. And it's not that you're particularly materialistic in the first place, but you suddenly realize, you go, oh, actually, nobody really cares. Nobody, actually, probably no one noticed that I wore all that makeup or that I had my Hugo Boss suit. It's nice to have, but it isn't a necessity. And I think that's the bit that people get confused with. And it's the necessity that people miss when they step away and realize I can just be me.
Yes, and I totally agree with that. And I think it is how I like to define it is like, what is that you need, right? So that's like you talked about the bare necessities, right? I need to have food. I need to feed my kids, right? From a real kind of, we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? The real foundation, right? Do I need a 5-bedroom house? No, I don't need, right? So for me, that whole process was about what is it that we truly need? I mean, I was also fortunate because my husband was still earning, right? So there was less of pressure. But once I made a decision to go out on my own, I was like, okay, even if I don't, what do I do? Do I kind of, and it'll be different for different people, right? Based on your own personal circumstances. Because I had considered maybe I'll become a coach in some sort of coaching outfit, right? So I will coach their corporate clients, right? And they'll just, I'll be like a consultant coach, right? And coach their clients. Or I can do some sort of hybrid and then do my own private clients at the same time. Or I could consider going back to HR through an L&D kind of HRE type kind of role or something like that. But that I didn't really fancy that because that'd be full time. And I was like, so I made the jump to go 100% my own business, no backup. There's basically no plan B apart from plan B is if really this doesn't work out, I'll go and do something else. But after working for so many years, I built up a little bit of a piggy bank, right? And I was okay to dig into that, right? I was okay to dig into it because and this is where the mindset, right? And because humans have this really peculiar relationship with money, right? And sometimes I'm not quite sure whether I fear money more or love money, right? Do I fear the lack of it, which means, it's a fixed mindset, right? Once the money comes in, I've got to hold on to it, right? Or do I go from, it's like money is just kind of an exchange. It's kind of like energy, right? So, and for energy to work, it's got to, come in and out, right? Like breathing, you can't just hold your breath and live. also I got to exhale, right? So I've chosen to look at money, which is still a work in progress, to be honest, is to, especially when you see the bank account just kind of drop. No, because that's just a reflection, right? This is what your brain is telling you, right? This is unsafe, it's unsafe, it's going down, it's unsafe, right? Whereas you're kind of like, okay, but I want to be a different person. If I want to be a different person who is more confident and who believes in herself more, then I've got to be that person, right? I can't just sit here like this and wait. I just want to be more confident and I sit on my ass and do sweet FA, right? Because that ain't going to do anything, right? I got to create that momentum myself. So from that perspective, doing things on, running your own business or whatever gives you that much more of a space to really grow into who I am, because there's no one else to rely on. And ultimately, at the end of the day, you can't really rely on anyone, right? You're not in control of anything. You're not in control of your kids. You're not in control of your husband or your wife or whatever. All you're in control of is me. And if I can be the best version of me, whatever that looks like, right? At least I can visualize what she would be like. And at some points just kind of, oh, okay. But actually, it's that better or the best version of me actually isn't hugely different to me. She just feels different things. I'd still be brushing my teeth. I'd still be having showers. I'd still be screaming at the kids. I'd still be loading the dishwasher. I'd still be mopping up. I'd still be hoovering. I'd still be cleaning, all this kind of stuff, right? So 90% of my life would still be different. But 10% of that, which is in between here and how I feel, this is what I get to change, right? So I become that other person so that there's less fear. And that's how I've gotten around the whole money, because I don't have a steady income, oh my God, there's no paycheck coming in this month. Oh my God, that took me a long time. And I had to get some coaching right that actually to really explore, the minimal viable, what is it that you need, and going to even beyond that, right? What happens? You lose your house, you lose your car, you can't pay for your kids' schooling and all this kind of stuff. What would you still have left? And for me, it was like, I'd still have my kids. I'd still have my husband. Okay. We could be living in a cardboard box, but I can still choose to make that a fun experience. Right. And once I got to that point, I was like, well, actually, because I've never experienced it before, so it could be fun. Right. But ultimately, when it comes to that point, we've got friends, we've got family. I am very unlikely to be homeless. Right. Even when it came to the point that there's no more money, everything is red. Right. What would I have? I would still have me. I've still have my kids. And that's what's most important to me. And that's how I now revolve my life for right now. I've moved it around so that I'm not working for someone else, to make them more money, or I'm working so that I'm the happiest version that I can be, have fun every single day, have giggles with the kids, even though I want to freaking kill them, or vice versa, right? But we end up going to bed every night with a smile on our face. And that's nothing better than that.
And that's so important. And it comes back to the way we think affects the way we feel, and in turn affects the way we act. And it's all about that. And if the worst case happens, as you say, there is going to be a way out. But you just have to have that positivity and understanding to know you can do it. You've got friends, you've got family, you've got your husband, you've got your kids. It's hugely important to have all of those factors. How do you teach your children about money and the non-materialistic side of it and that relationship that we've just talked about there?
So my husband and I have quite frequent conversations about this. My parents come from are Chinese and, from a catering background. So I've worked since I was 12 years old, doing 18-hour days and all that kind of stuff, right? So for our kids, it's, and now with, the whole thing with, having a card on your phone and all this kind of stuff, right? Real money is actually, lots of places now don't even accept real cash anymore, right? So we always have this conversation. How can we ensure that our children don't become even more entitled than they already are, right? Because they've got so much more than when I was a child. So we have open conversations with our children. So so whenever from a very young age, whenever we went, say, for instance, to a supermarket with the kids, they would say, "Oh, can I have this? Can I have that?" As a going in position, we'd say no, right? No, right? Because until you have your own money, you don't you can buy your own things. And as they've now gotten older, pre-teens now, they have their own money. Because they get them for birthdays, grandparents, and all this kind of stuff, right? And we give it to them, whatever. We talk to them about, okay, So say, for instance, sometimes for simple things, it's like, okay, we're going to get takeout. Family for 4 might cost 40, 50 quid, right? So we're going to get that, and they'll be like, and we'll show it to them. It's like, this is how much £50 is, right? And then we'll compare it to something else that we've done previously, right? It's like, well, but that is the equivalent of an hour doing a high ropes course, or it is, however many McDonald's Happy Meals or whatever else, right? So give them a comparison to how much this is worth versus something else, because it's not as if, when I was young, we could still do paper routes, right? They don't do them anymore because papers barely exist now, right? And also there's different regulations. They cannot allow that. It's not so easy just to get a part-time job. So we use comparison, versus one thing versus another. We have a really open conversation about, hey, we'll say, okay, so how much would it cost to buy the house that we're currently living in, right? And what does that mean if you have a mortgage and or savings? And we talk about that kind of stuff. That I actually, I think our education system could probably be tweaked a bit to help with the real life aspects of life. Then, then not that I don't think that geography, history, arts are not important, right? But there's something there that I feel that it's just missing. So so we do it that way. I mean, we don't even give our kids pocket money anymore, or ever did, because I'm like, what am I going to give you pocket money for? To unload the dishwasher? Well, you're part of this family. That's just something you've got to do. I don't pay I pay a cleaner to come in, right? Oh, okay. So, but if you want to clean the house like she does, right, do the bathrooms and all this kind of, I'll pay you, right? I don't want to do that. But she is here for 3 hours, and this is how much she gets. Do you want to do that, right? So that's how we. How about you? Have you got any ways talk about money?
The reason I laugh quite so hard as you're talking there is because I think we do it very similarly. We have the same conversations that, oh, can't I just have, and is it just, and can we just do that? And why can't we just do that? The latest one being, well, can't we just go and buy a new car? No, I can't just go and buy a new car. Yeah, but if you stopped buying coffee, then we'd be able to afford a car, right? I drink a lot of coffee, don't get me wrong, but I don't drink 30 grams worth of coffee. So we're going to drive around in the shithole banger that we have. That's fine. We'll stick with that. So I think it's very much the same conversation. And I think the comparison is actually really important. And I think I said before, actually, my daughter's just going through the down the route of buying contact lenses.
Okay, yeah.
Wears glasses, has done for a while. And said, can I wear some contact lenses? I said, sure, not a problem at all. I wear them. I get it. I hate wearing glasses. It's a pain. If you've got the ability to wear contacts, sure. You can get a job and you can pay for them. She's 50. How much are they? About £16 a month. That's 20 pairs of lenses. That's kind of £16. That's ridiculous. No, I think that's pretty good going. Right, let's work it out per day, per lens, and work out. And she still wasn't convinced. So then we talked about a job, and we talked about the minimum wage, what that looks like. She's obviously still below that. And I said, well, okay, let's work it out on £6 an hour, £7 an hour, something like that. I said, you work 6 hours a weekend, which is perfectly doable. There's lots of cafes. We live by the sea. Fish and chip restaurants, all sorts of things. £6 an hour. That's £36 for the weekend. Do that 4 times in a month. Okay, £16 isn't so bad for lenses. And then I can have a bit to put away and a bit to spend. Okay. Now we're getting somewhere. And I think it's that comparison and because they are entitled. My children 100% do not know that they are poor. I live in a nice house. I'm divorced, so I've remarried, but we have split times with the other parents. So we have 50-50. And they live between 2 houses. We all live in a very nice house. We live in nice areas. My daughter this year has spent New Year in Venice.
Ooh, nice.
Italy on a geography field trip. Tanzania for a month with a Campus International expedition. That's a bit different. She raised £4,000 for that. And then they're off to Turkey in October half term. And then she says, well, I'm just sick of being in this country. Yeah, should we just stop and, think about that for a minute and, let's think. And then try and compare it, actually. And I think this is the important bit because, we live in an area that has absolute deprivation and absolute wealth within a very short space of time. So their peers at school have a very different life. And my Ex was telling me that she's booked this holiday to Turkey with them, and my son was complaining that he didn't really want to go, which obviously she wasn't overly happy with. But it transpires that he had a friend with him who said, I don't know what you're complaining about. I've never been out the country.
Yeah.
And that's the reality. And I think for me, trying to explain that and get that to my children, you know, and I'm sure it's the same for you. What's for dinner? Oh, I don't know, sausage and mash. Oh,
Again.
sausages again. Yeah,
Yeah.
again. Well,
Yeah.
we've not had sausages for like 2 weeks, but yes, again. There are kids who won't have that choice, who won't have any food tonight. So, and it's not about shaming them. It's not about, it's it's just trying to get them to understand that there is a very different way of life and that they are actually very lucky. And we have the same when it comes to work. And this is something that I don't know if you've experienced. I have a networking meeting once a week. So one day a week when I have my children, I go out at 5 o'clock for an early networking meeting. I've been doing this 5 years. I've been divorced 7, and I've had 50 care of the kids ever since. So they've never really known. I've worked full time early on, and then I've had my own business since then. But every Monday night, Dad, do you still have to go out? Yes. Still Tuesday. Plenty of the day off. And I do sometimes, like there are ways around it. But it's just that they get so used to having something. And what they don't see is that the rest of the week, mornings and evenings, I am there to pick them up from school. And that for me is absolute satisfaction. That's why I have my own business. That's why I do what I do, because they are my absolute why. So I can spend time with them, apart from that one Tuesday morning. And I think it's really funny that we have the conversation, but it's what they know, what they understand, and how they move with that. And I think, again, that's so important for people to understand that the freedom that you have is so different. I don't ever have to worry about calling for someone's permission if one of them is sick, or if there's a school play, or if they're coming home early or late. I'm there to pick them up. I work completely different hours to be able to do that, but I'm there, and that's that luxury and that freedom. And I'm sure it is the same for you. And I think people look in and they say, "Oh, you're so lucky to do that." And I'm like, "Yeah, actually, I am. I had to work my butt off the rest of the time to do it, but I have that freedom and I have that choice." And
And that,
I'm sure you feel the same.
totally. And and when people say, "Oh, you're so lucky," it's like, but you can do it too. Right? It's not because I'm special, right? It isn't because I've got an IQ of 2050 or whatever, to be able to do this, right? Everyone, like you said earlier, everyone has choice. It doesn't really matter how dire things are, right? There's always a gift in everything, right? Okay, you could say, "Oh, Doris, you're on some happy drugs," right? Yes, I am, because I'm naturally an optimist person, right? I don't stay down, I don't go down very often, and I don't typically tend to stay there, right? But it is that, okay, but it's down to me. I have a choice, right? And it's kind of, and the people who don't see that is because they've lived their life so much, or all of it, pleasing others, right? It's all about pleasing a boss or pleasing a parent. And do you know what? I was one of those. I'm a Chinese girl, 2 Chinese parents from Hong Kong back in the days when barely had running water. I know what it's like, right? But if a short-ass Chinese girl can break out of that really strong familial cultural bond, freaking hell, everyone else on this bloody planet can do it. And like you say, there is people out there who are living in frigging war zones who actually don't have running water. In this country, it's illegal not to have running water, right? No matter where you're living, right? Even if you're not paying your bills, right? So you kind of like, we're so lucky as it is. Like you're saying, this is where, whenever we're traveling or whatever, and we see something that's like, we kind of tell the kids, look at that child. That child is walking around without any shoes. That child is carrying something, he's begging in the street. And you're whining this morning about having scrambled eggs on toast because you wanted something healthy. Like, this person out there begging for their food. Everyone has a choice, and it does require courage to step out the comfort zone, whether that comfort zone is a toxic work environment, or the comfort zone is, I'm just on, minimum wage, or, I earn 7 figures, or whatever else, right, out of the world that you live in. But until, like I said before, until you change your thinking, right, and take a different action at different things that you wouldn't have done normally, right? Nothing's going to change. It's kind of like, what is that? Albert Einstein says, it's insanity if you keep on doing the same things and expecting different results, right? Do something different. Right? And it doesn't have to be big, right? It doesn't have to say, oh no, okay, I'm really horrible. I really don't like my job, so I'm just going to jack it in with no plan. I'm not saying that. It's kind of like, do something else that changes your environment. But even if that means I'm just going to go out for a 20-minute walk, and I don't normally do that. It means, hey, actually, instead of just sitting in front of Netflix, I'm just going to call someone on the phone, right? It's as simple as that, right? It is stop doing the typical habits that you kind of default to and do something different. Oh, instead of watching Netflix, I'm actually going to pick up a book. It's all those little things. And because people, and I think, what people see is they kind of see the end results, right? Because you're really happy, right? They haven't seen the messy 3 or 4 years that went before this, before I got to this. Oh my God, I'm actually really comfortable here. There was a whole period of really uncomfortableness, right? But I made a choice. This is what I was going to do, right? It's kind of like, what people say, you see, Usain Bolt for 10 seconds, but you didn't see the 20 years I walked up to for just that 20 seconds. And this is what building a life that you truly want is all about, right? Let's put all those little things, being consistent, doing something different, really being clear about what it is that you want and who you want to be, and feeling that first before you say, because it's never going to be perfect. No one's going to hand it onto a plate. I did expect that when I first stepped out of corporate, right, and did my coaching degree. The coaches, they've got like, okay, I'm a coach now, people, come. I'm open for business. Nothing happened, right, for months. And I was like, because I didn't take any action. I wasn't going out there marketing myself. I wasn't being visible, right? But you learn along the way. Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like having faith in yourself. As long as you've got faith in yourself, it doesn't matter what other people think.
The faith and the patience to go through it. And as you say, nobody sees the tears, the heartache, the collapse in a puddle on the floor because the bills are coming in and there's no money to pay them. They just see that end product.
Yeah, because you all rock up because you're happy, right? During this million time, because we are, right? But like you say, 2 years ago, it wasn't like this. It was kind of, like you say, how are we going to pay for this? What am I going to do? And there will be dips, ups and downs, ups and downs, ups and downs. But it's that consistency. Sometimes it's kind of like, hey, look back where you came from, right? And celebrate that, right? It doesn't matter, you haven't quite achieved your goals or whatever else, right? And they keep changing anyway, right? So it's okay, right? But just kind of sometimes just look back and see how far you've actually come instead of, oh my God, I've still got this massive mountain to climb, right? See how far you've come up already, right? And say, okay, if you can do this, you can do more, right? Because that gives you self-confidence.
And as you say, everybody has the choice.
Yes.
Everyone has the ability to make a change and do something. Whether they have the wherewithal to do it or not is a whole different story. But everybody has that choice. Looking back at your corporate career, because I don't want to bash it completely, because actually so many people are happy in their jobs and you wouldn't be where you are today without that experience in the corporate world. What was it that you enjoyed and what skills did you really gain from that corporate life?
Whole host of skills, that I'm putting into, into my own business now, all the analytical skills, all the speaking to, vendors and third parties and, communication skills, and working with other people, all the skills, everything, has a part to play in my version 2.0, I like to call it, right? The Excel skills I picked up, right? And all the business planning and forecasting, all that, those all comes helpful. Knowing how to rock out a PowerPoint presentation at the drop of a hat, I mean, and being able to do, basically public speaking or doing a presentation, right? It's all of these kind of things come in handy, right? Running my own little micro business, right? But what I do miss as being a solopreneur is not having the people bit, right? It's not as if I'm working in a team, it's just me, right? Which is why, and that bit was quite difficult initially to kind of, who do I talk to? Because there's no one to brainstorm with, right? But, we've got this amazing AI now, right? So that can do a bit, right? It's not quite the same, right? Don't really have a coffee with it. I'm sitting there with a coffee and just tapping things into AI or I talk to it, right? But so there's stuff. But the real human things, this is where I've got to do make a bit more effort, right? Like for you, it's kind of once a week you go out to this networking events, right? In-person networking events. That I do miss having that, because I'm a people person from that perspective. I get a lot of energy by being around other people. But I, like you, I create that in my own little world, right? Whether that's virtual, whether that's in person, right? I make sure that I've got a crowd of people around me who I can just call up and we have regular chats with. I schedule them with some people regularly on a weekly basis, sometimes once a month or whatever else, to have that kind of check-in, right? That's the only bit. The people bit is probably the only thing that I miss. But now, sometimes in corporate, you didn't have a choice, really, sometimes, right? With the people that you kind of have to work with, right? I have total 100% choice, right? With the people I go on podcasts with, the people I chat to. If I don't like them, I don't ever have to speak to them again, right? Whereas in corporate, even if you didn't like them, you still have to work the next 6 months with that person on a project or whatever. That I don't have, right? So whereas that is for me, when I was working with people I didn't enjoy, that was a huge energy drain for me. So now I don't have that. Actually, I get to spend with people who, even after just a 10-minute conversation, I'm like, whoa, I'm ready to go. It's kind of like I've had a boost of, extra strong caffeine or something without drinking the coffee, right? That is beautiful. And I get to choose the people I surround myself with. So that's a real benefit, which, if you're some senior manager and you've got some people working for you or with you that you don't like, it's not as if you can just boot them out the door, right? You kind of have to sometimes suffer through it, right? But again, even in those situations, there's different ways of looking at it as well, right? So that doesn't become an energy drain, which those skills I probably only learned after I stepped out, because I felt as if I didn't have a choice in that moment while I was in corporate, right? I just had to suffer through it, right? I just had to go through it. Whereas now I notice it more. Hey, this is not working. How can I make it work? Do I want to make it work? And if I don't want to make it work, it's like, thank you very much for your time. And off I go, right? It's all about that whole kind of value added, right? Instead of I'm sitting here for another meeting about the same thing that we talked about last week and a week before, and I'm on my friggin' hell, none of that. That doesn't happen anymore. And that's fun.
And that's the bit that people get stuck in, is that absolute just cyclical meetings, the negative drain, the energy draining that have, because you are stuck. You can't do anything. You're not doing it for yourself. You have to do it. You expect it to be there. I get the solopreneur bit as well, actually. And that always makes me laugh, because I'm like, who do I hand my expenses to? My laptop's not working. Who do I call for IT?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, me. I'm starting off my own expenses. No, you can't have that kind of Coke today.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just different, but you find ways. And I think one of the biggest pieces of advice I give to my clients around that is surround yourself with people who know more than you about things that you don't know, because that's the hardest bit when you don't have that team that you rely on, the legal, the computers, financial. You have to find someone who knows that. And also, and this conversation is absolute testament, find people who have the energy, who have the buzz that you can connect with and help you move forward and be that kind of better version of yourself.
Yeah, that's it. That's all it, because we are forever, every day, if you choose to, right, growing, right, and developing and evolving into whatever that's meant to be doing. But I think the freedom of being able to do it on your own, running your own business, is you get. I think well, I don't know, because I'm not there yet. But for me, that growth that I've had in my own personal self over the last 4 years is incomparable to the 20 years. I've never had this much personal growth in the 20 years I was in corporate, right?
And the
And
excitement.
yeah.
I think the excitement of being able to do your own thing, to be your own boss, to have the ups and downs, you are in control, you have the freedom. You want a meeting, yes or no. It's that simple. You don't have to say yes. You have that ability to do it. Do you think you ever imagined yourself 20 years ago sitting where you are now, doing what you're doing?
No, this wasn't even anything that a coach wasn't even in my dictionary, 20 some years ago. What I wanted, when I first started in the corporate, was that, for me, it was the whole, I want the money, I want the promotions, I want the accolades, right? That's what success looked like for me. And stepping into corporate role kind of met all of that. Yes, you get your promotion. Oh my God, I got a pay rise, you know what I mean? And that all was this, what say now, it's the outside looking in, whereas now I'm much more inside looking out, right? But this whole inside looking out isn't something that we really taught, right, in school or anything like that, right? Because society has its own structures and rules and scripts and all that kind of stuff, what is seen as acceptable. The whole social media we talked about, I mean, you'll see the smiles, you don't see the sweat, blood, and tears that went on behind that, right? Some people are a bit more authentic, and sharing all that kind of journey, but most people are like, just let me see the glossy bit, right? And it's the whole thing about change, right? People are probably okay with change, but they want the end result that change brings. They don't want the whole process that goes through it. But we can't ever short circuit that, right? Well, you can in a lot of ways. Coaching is one aspect, and can help you short circuit anything, right? But and consultancy and all that kind of stuff. But it's that kind of having that freedom to be able, to swing left today, and tomorrow I'm just going to swing right because I want to. Because actually swinging left, tried it and actually didn't work. Actually, I want to go right. We are a bit of in business, you had your scenarios, you had your reviews, right? This is the way we're going to go, even though, halfway through it and you're like, well, it's probably not the best way. No, we made a decision. We got to go here, right? And you get, a result that might not have been the most optimum. Whereas now, I can use pretty bright pink colors in my presentations if I choose to use a presentation. I never was allowed to do that. There was only 3 corporate colors, right? And you're like, no, I could use bright pink and I just can yellow on black or whatever, right? And I was never allowed to do that. Right now, I can be fully. I guess, I can fully express myself in all the ways. In my creative ways, in the way I speak. Much more. If I think it's shit, right? And I couldn't say that, right? In corporate, you know what I mean? Even dropping a few f-bombs. You know what I mean? I was like in corporate, you'd be like, oh my god. Whereas now I'm like, yeah, well, it's freaking shit. There's no 2 ways about it. Right? I'm not saying, and kind of guess less judgment as well. There's much less judgment, which is amazing. There's so much, that society of people, parents tell you that you have to be, and now getting rid of all those layers just is freer. There's the freedom, and it's a feeling. Like we just said, if you could bottle it, I don't think I've got the words to be able to put into the. It's because it's a feeling, right? There's no words to it. I can't express. Happiness doesn't even touch it, if you know what I mean. Joy, yes, but it's more. It's all the sparkles that come with it, right? That is just, and you've got to feel it to really understand it. This is one of the things that you've got to feel it. That's it. You've got to feel this freedom, this lightness, this, brightness, this. God, it's just, yeah, I don't know. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. And
So,
if you could have a pill, I would hand it all out to everyone in the world.
given that we don't have a pill to explain that feeling and that the lightness, the excitement, the fun, what would you say to one of your colleagues still back in corporate who's looking to get out, stuck, miserable, in the drudgery? What would you say to them to give them the hope and the inspiration to get them to the point where you are today, to make them realize that there is light at the end of the tunnel, without telling them there's light at the end of the tunnel, because that's just
Yeah, but
what it is?
yeah. I think what I suggest is just, not always easy. It's kind of like, do take some time away if you have the time. Not just go on a holiday, with the family, although that's fun, but take some time out to really think about you. Not you as the mum or a dad or a wife or a husband, blah, 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 blah. You, right? And sit there, go for a walk, go by the sea. Sea typically is where I get most of my inspiration and I get the really feels. Is to sit really quietly and really ask yourself what is it that I truly want, and get that, and don't make a judgment of it, right? Don't say, oh, that's just a bit crazy or whatever. No judging. Either say I'd like to write it down even, and not just thinking it. Start there. That's probably a good starting point. What I like to help people with also is to kind of like, what does success truly look like for you now? Not what it was 20 years ago, right? But now, yeah, like for you and me both is like, my children are my why, right? This is why I'm doing what it is that I'm doing, because I can build a lifestyle around it, and also I can become a better person. The best way to explain, my view on parenting now is I'm the trampoline, right? I'm the trampoline in my children's life. I've got to be solid. So yeah, and then they can use me as a springboard to whatever it is that they choose to move on to later on in life, right? But all I am is a trampoline, right? And for them, to those people who are in that potential corporate rut just now, it's like, what is it that you truly want? And, what does success look like for you? And not put, oh, well, if only I earned an extra £10,000 a year, and I would have to, no. Forget all the money, right? Just imagine you could all have all the money that you had and all the health and everything else, right? What does success look like for you? How do you want to feel? And again, it comes back to how do you want to feel? Because in corporate, we sit here 90% of the time, right? It's moving into your body and saying, hey, how does it truly feel? And use feeling words, not I think. That's for me. What about you? What would you say to them?
Yes, 100%. I think that is so important. It's something that I struggle with because obviously we are in a very fortunate position well into the journey. We're certainly not at the end of the journey. There's still building, there's still lots to do and lots of excitement to be had. But it's that first step that people have to take. And absolutely what you said, sit down, write it. I get people to look at their skills is actually what I get to do first. Because I think when people start to understand their skills and when you're stuck in a job, any corporate, healthcare, education, you become that job and you forget who you are. And that's just the way it is. I think that's just part and parcel of being employed. So when you ask someone what do they do, you get a job title. And then when you start to delve down into some of those skills, people go, well, I don't really have any. Or, oh, well, I can use a computer, or I do a bit of management, or a bit of time. Yeah, it's all a bit bland. But this isn't you, and I know this isn't you. So what is it that you have that you could take on to something else? You're sat there, you're telling me you're miserable, you're not happy. Right. What skills do you have to take you forward? And what do you imagine yourself doing? That's why I was interested to hear your thoughts on did you imagine yourself doing? Because I don't think most people do. But when you stop, you look at the skills, what is it that you truly want to do? And then can you imagine yourself doing it? How do you bridge that gap? And it's really interesting because the people that I speak to, not exclusively, but a large percentage, will have something that they've always wanted to do, but it's been suppressed for whatever reason. Cultural, financial, fear, worry. They have something they want to do. They just don't know how to. And that's when they put those barriers up. And as you said, oh yeah, but I need £10,000 extra to do this, or I need that, or I can't do it because of this. It's like, what is it that makes you happy? What is it that makes you light up? And what's so interesting from my point of view and talking to my prospective clients and clients about it is when you find that thing, they light up. They have that look. It's like, oh, I never like that childhood, almost that childlike love for what it is that they want. And it's because they've never been allowed to have that thought.
Yes.
And I think that's because you get stuck in that corporate world, you get squashed, you get put into the kind of washing machine of it all. And when you spat out is when you can go, oh, there is a world and I can do it and I have that freedom. And I think that's so important for people to try and understand that
And
there is this world outside.
And I think sometimes, that just having that first initial conversation can be just the spark that someone needs, right? But it is that, which is why, I say to people, don't, like you said, right, don't talk to your parents or your best friend or whatever. Go and talk to someone external, right, to your immediate environment because they know you. And actually, and they're not really stretching you because they know what it is to keep what they're trying to do. It's not because they're malicious or, horrible. They all just want to keep you safe. Do you really want to leave this job? It's really good, right? Because they know that you've got all these bills and your kids want to do this and you've got holidays paying for and all this kind of stuff, right? They're like, well, but if you don't have a job for 6 months, then what? All they want to do is to keep you safe, right? So, those people are great, right, for the moral support and all that kind of stuff, right? But to get a view is, like I said, go and speak to David or go and speak to Doris, just to have someone who is not connected with anything to ask you the difficult questions that you're not asking yourself, right? And you can't ask yourself that because they're not in your head, because you've never had them, right? So it requires someone else external to you who doesn't know you to kind of sit there and play, okay, this is, you keep saying this word, or you keep, you don't, it doesn't feel quite right. Or, like you said, they just sit there and say, oh, well, I don't have any skills. And you're like, oh, there, okay, you're feeling a bit down about that. Right? Yeah, I can see that. Everything is like this, but this is how they live their lives every single day, like, yeah, no freaking tired. I'm looking at you, I'm tired, right? And you're sitting here like, oh my God, life is so cool, right? And it's having so much fun. But you kind of sitting there like, okay, but there is more. But some people also feel that, by going out and speaking to someone else, they think that's kind of potential weakness, right? Because they're asking for help. And you're like, when have we ever achieved something just by me? We've always achieved something with something else, and whether that's a partner being there cooking your dinner, whether it's a child being there giving you a hug, whether that's a colleague saying well done, or it's a boss saying, hey, here's your promotion. We've never ever just achieved something just by ourselves, right? There's always people to lean on and help, right? And why don't we just do more of that rather than putting a judgment on just because I asked for help?
And you said that right at the beginning. You said that about your children. You
Yeah, I
didn't
didn't.
know how to parent in that appropriate way because it was different to how you were brought up.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Asking for help is absolutely, and I think, back to that point, it takes two things generally. I think you need a catalyst, whatever that catalyst may be, bad news in and around your environment, absolute sick of it, whatever it happens to be. And then that ignition to take that next step. And that's the conversation with someone like you just said, like you, like me, someone who's done it outside of your initial circle to push and move forward. And then it is possible. I realize we've talked an awful lot around and about lots of things, but we haven't actually really talked about Happy Bunny coaching and what it is you actually do. Just briefly, as we kind of finish up, explain to us what Happy Bunny coaching does and who is it that you actually help.
Okay, so I help those individuals who, on the outside, they look all glossy and have got it all together, right? They're smashing at work. They've got their kids' schedules, I mean, within a minute, right? All planned out, and there are like some super, domestic god or goddess at home, right? Home is everything. And they still rock up with a smile, right? But really behind it, they're kind of running on caffeine or alcohol and, on feelings like shame, resentment, and all that kind of stuff. Those are kind of people that I help to kind of, because they've kind of lost themselves. They're all just doing, right? They're being this superhero for everyone, right? And it's kind of like, hey, it's okay to not be a superhero 100% of the time. The cape can sometimes just be tucked away. So that's what I do. I kind of help them get into a point where they don't feel as if they're forever just hustling and doing more, so that they can still kick ass in their careers or their companies, right? They can still be the present parent, when the kids are at home, but they also know who they are. So, key study was myself. And, 7, 8 years ago, I had no idea who I was. I was just being the parent, being whatever else. And so I helped them kind of reassess what's truly important to them, how it is that they truly want to show up, how they want to feel, and actually get rid of some of these bullshit rules that, we've been downloaded from wherever, genetically or not, right, or just absorbed. Figure out which of these rules are really serving them and which ones are not. And for those that they are not serving them, I kind of help them with, reframing them, or actually just let's bust them, right, and not adopt it. Yeah, so that they can just have a bit more fun. That's really the reason why I do what I do. I just want to have more fun. And I believe we take things just a bit too seriously. And, if I can just help people just bring a smile to their face and kind of see life a bit more differently, less heavy, then it's all success to me.
And fun is key to all of that.
All of it. More fun.
More and more fun. What's next? What's on the agenda over the coming months and looking forward, dare I say, to 2026?
Yeah, so I am going to do my first workshop in November, 1 hour free workshop in November. So that is, I'll be sending out details about that next week. And then onwards and upwards, or whatever that looks like, I have no real kind of big vision apart from I'm doing this because I love what it is that I do. I want to leave a legacy and I want to become the better version of me. And for me to do that, part of it is also helping those people who could potentially be my kids' future bosses, right? So that, I spent so much time, effort, and money, raising the horriblenesses, that I don't want someone to, when they go and start their first job or whatever, someone to come in with a big, hammer and just smash them down. So my part of this while I'm going through this is also to help my kids become more resilient, helping their future bosses be more empathetic and understanding and all that kind of stuff. So however much I can, touch the people who are my people and attract them into my ecosystem to kind of help them in any which way, that's what I look forward to doing. So that will probably mean some speaking engagements for me and some more workshops and whatever else. I mean, I'm all open. And what I find is that as soon as you start doing something, all these other opportunities pop up. So it's kind of be like, oh my God, which one, right? And the key is then not to get procrastinated. It's like, oh my God, this is so new and I can't do that, right? So yeah, this is where I'll get to continually develop myself to kind of like, yeah, okay, this one feels good. I'm going to go with that one. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know what the future holds, but it's going to be exciting and it's definitely going to be fun.
Please share the details of your course with us, because I will certainly be signing up myself, and I hope others do as well. And I know it'll be a huge success. Doris, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate you. And the energy that you bring to this conversation has just been so fantastic to have. And I hope everybody listening and watching can see that energy, understand that energy, and see that that change really is possible. And I think you are a true testament to that. So thank you so much. And I wish you all the best with whatever happens next.
Thank you so much for your time, David. Catch you around.
Take care. Bye-bye.